Take the Highway 6 exit off 290 heading west out of Houston and you'll feel instantly transported to another time. And I'm not just talking about the dinosaurs. Within seconds you're introduced to a more authentic version of Texas, the image that most people conjure up when thinking of the Lone Star State. As you drive north on Highway 6, you'll see modest homesteads hidden behind old trees, tucked away in corners of fields where longhorn cows peacefully ruminate and seek refuge from the blistering sun. You'll see the gates of grand ranches with yellow flags bearing angry little snakes flying next to them, while gargantuan ranch houses survey their land atop driveways that seem to go for miles. You'll also see the remnants of old wooden farmsteads whose families and owners have long since gone, perhaps to the big cities in search of work, away from the harsh environs and oppressing heat of ranch life. After a while you'll veer off the main highway where you'll be surprised by impressive, looming Victorian mansions littering the roadside throughout more modern homes and establishments. Finally, you'll find yourself in the quaint, historic town of Navasota, whose boutique-lined streets can hardly mask the smell of gunpowder from the showdowns of the Wild West, which took place just over a century ago. Am I romanticising a little bit here? Maybe. But if ever there was a series in which to exercise romantic notions and enchanted visions, this is the one. Welcome to Houston Strange. My name is Adam and I will be your host. Today we're venturing just a little bit outside of Houston proper to the town of Navasota, which has in recent years become home to a true Houston legend, who I was lucky enough to sit down with in his very own Victorian mansion. One of the main reasons why I started Houston Strange was because I wanted to experience Houston on a deeper level. I wanted to romance and be romanced by this sprawling city, and Houston Strange would be my love letter to her. I wanted to meet more Houstonians, whether they were blow-ins or born here, and I've been very lucky so far in the connections that I've made and the opportunities that I've had in the very short span of Houston Strange. I hope this continues in all directions moving forward, but this episode, or rather the next few episodes, are very special to me on a more personal level. My wife came along with me on this little adventure as she had briefly met this person a few years ago, but she was eager to get to know him, learn his story, and besides, who could pass up the opportunity to sip tea in the lounge of RavenWolf Manor?
And I just look at you all, I don't look at any of the...
Look wherever you want.
Okay.
As comfortable as you can.
Okay. Well, my name is Lawyer Douglas II, and I am the current caretaker and owner of RavenWolf Manor. So whenever people ask me what my job is, I love saying that I'm an innkeeper in a haunted Victorian bed and breakfast. The idea of being an innkeeper sounds so old-timey, and I gladly take the title of innkeeper, which was also kind of nice whenever I could say, oh, I'm an owner of an oddities and curiosities shop, which that again sounds so romantic to me. And I love that in my life I've been able to do two of my lifelong dreams. And when I had the oddity shop, it was actually a cross between the two. What was I going to do? Was I going to do the innkeeper of a bed and breakfast, or was I going to do the oddity shop? And because I owned a store previous to the Wilde Collection in that building, then I was just an easy transition to just continue being in the retail space. And I thought, well, then the innkeeper in a Victorian house will have to be something that I do at another date, and I'm doing it right now.
When I first came to Houston specifically to hang out with the person who would eventually become my incredible wife, she took me to this little store in the Heights. I didn't really know where we were going, but to be honest, I was more than happy to just tag along. This store was a fairly non-assuming little black bungalow with a red door and a PT Cruiser designed to look like a hearse parked outside. The day was far too bright, and I was totally unaccustomed to the deliriously hot and humid Houston weather. But this was quickly forgotten upon entering this little haven. Walking through that door, I felt the fantastical whimsy that's typically only reserved for young children. My senses were thrown into overdrive. Exotic fragrances filled the air with scents I'd never smelled before. Victorian-era medical supplies lined shelves. Display cases housed human teeth and religious artifacts. In one corner, a fully grown lion stood proud near a coffin where the skeleton of someone who long ago passed rested respectfully. albino peacocks pecked away peacefully, and genuine antique vampire hunting kits, complete with vials of holy water, sat in their aged wooden chests. Even as I'm describing this place from my own memory, it doesn't quite seem real. But this was the Wilde Collection. Lawyer's oddities and curiosities shop, which was truly like no other. Unfortunately, in November 2019, the Wilde Collection was the target of an arson attack which it would never recover from. The arsonist, suffering from an untreated mental illness, walked into the store and began dousing it with petrol and set it ablaze with around a dozen people still inside. Thankfully, no people were hurt, but sadly, some of Lawyer's pets didn't make it. Now, I didn't want this series to be all about the Wilde Collection, but it was obviously a huge chapter in Lawyer's life, and the trauma of this event still affects him daily.
In losing the Wilde Collection, it happened so quickly to me. I traveled out of town to Salem, and when I came back, I didn't come back to what I had. And so that feeling that I could just lose everything in a split second, and then the thought that that the arson will be released and my address is out there. So I do have this feeling that, you know, this is not permanent and I'm not permanent, because he might get out and he's going to be up for parole this month. And so, you know, he might be out. I'm hoping that he will have forgotten all about me and he's not hearing the voices, because he won't have that threat that he felt that I posed on him, and he will move on. But it could happen that he'll start hearing the voices again that tells him to finish what he's done or what he started. And the idea that me moving here could mean that the place will be burnt to the ground. It's a really horrible feeling that I struggle with every single day. Every single time that I've put up a picture or put up anything in my head, I picture it burning and falling to the ground. And so, and this is daily. Like, I walk and then I'm like, oh, I love my house. And then as soon as I say that, the intrusive thoughts come and I picture it burning. And so me working so quickly is that feeling that I have to see it done in the event that that I'm not around anymore to see it done. So it is based on something sad and not just like me working like a madman just to see it done. So.
But I wanted to know more about Lawyer himself. How did he become this truly unique individual? This purveyor of all things fascinating and macabre?
It sort of reminds me of the question when people talk about the word normal, and then people are like, well, you know, what is normal? And to me, this, what we just walked, this is so normal to me. It just feels normal. I don't feel like I'm doing anything out of the ordinary. And sometimes when I see what people actually describe as normal, it looks bizarre to me. It looks put on. It sort of looks like a facade. It feels like unflavored chicken, another food thing. And so,
Flour, the spice.
yeah, it's that. And so, yeah, when people are just like, you know, oh, you know, I'm thinking this is normal. And so when people ask if I was raised traditionally, I feel like I was, even though anybody else who knows my upbringing, like my, you know, anybody who's outside of my family would be like, oh, that's kind of weird and that is not normal. But when it's normal in your household, it doesn't matter if it's normal in the world, because that's your norm. And so my normal was that my father was Southern Baptist with deep roots in Louisiana voodoo, and those two things intermingling. And then it was normal for me that my mother was Mexican Catholic with curanderia and santeria mixed into that, and all the images that all those belief systems and superstitions that they have, all that was very, very normal. And so when people tell me, you know, that it wasn't normal, or that, I'm just like, really? Because even now, whenever I think of the weirdest stories that have happened in my upbringing, it all feels very, very, very normal. A lot of things that you're seeing right now, it was stuff that scared me growing up. I was completely terrified of so many things. I even have, I collect Avon Cape Cod. I don't know if you're familiar with Avon Cape Cod dishes. And I remember being little, and they had these Avon parties, and then they'd try to sell you this Avon Cape Cod. And whenever I would see Cape Cod, for some reason in my head, I'm like, oh, that's scary. People who buy that, their house is haunted if they have Cape Cod. It just looked, I know, it was, and I'm talking me being like 10 years old and seeing this Cape Cod thing and being like, oh, that's scary. And I remember every time I would see it, it would give me these feelings. And now I collect it. And I think, oh my God, I'm the scary person that I thought was collecting it. But it stemmed from fear, and with fear comes curiosity. Sometimes when people are fearful of something, they kind of stay away from it. It always draws me in because I want to know what is making me feel these things that no other thing is making me feel. And it's one of those things like, how can I get close enough to the lion without getting bit? And what is too close to that lion without getting bit? And so all my life, it was just sort of playing with just getting close enough to all these superstitions and to all these fears. And throughout me doing that, it has unfortunately created some PTSD that I have with certain things and certain ideas, namely exorcisms and being demon possessed, which is very big in Catholicism and also in voodoo, and believing that that was actually a thing that happened to people. I watched the movie The Exorcist like it was a documentary. And so all these things were very scary to me. And I thought, I have to give in to the darkness in order to find the light. It doesn't make any sense for people. I feel like it doesn't make any sense to me when people just want to stay in the light, because darkness does exist. And it is because of the darkness that the light is so beautiful. You can't have one without the other. And so I try to live in a frame of mind that I want to be as immersed in one as I am with the other. And to deny one, you're denying a plethora of beautiful feelings and beautiful emotions. If you only live in darkness, you can't experience the blooms and the flowers and the sunsets and the sunrises and all that. And so you have to kind of have the both. And I was saying, with the fear and trying to get too close but not too close, it's sort of the things that scared me, thrilled me, and fascinated me. And so in the quest to try to understand those feelings, it kind of made me dive into the supernatural and all the odd and curious things that now I adore. One of the reasons that I've been a lifelong skeptic, and that was because I was fearful of things when I was a little boy, and so I had to debunk them. I couldn't just think that a noise was the devil coming to get me, because that was terrifying, that was immobilizing. So I was just like, I'm scared to go find out, and then there's a devil standing there ready to get me, but after a while I'm like, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go look for this noise, and I'm going to pray that it's not the devil there. And sometimes it was a dog or it was just something else, and I'd be like, oh my God. And that satisfaction of finding where the noise was or finding what did it made me a skeptic. And some people are natural storytellers, and they want to be able to tell a compelling story that you're going to be like, ooh, spooky, and sort of, it's kind of like that campfire scary story thing. So things are going to be embellished. Things are going to be misremembered if they're not purposely embellished. And so I always tell people to be as skeptical as absolutely possible. And anything that I'm saying, even don't believe me. It's just like investigate what I'm saying. Because again, some people might come into RavenWolf Manor and not experience anything, and go into one of the rooms that I told you that has had the most activity and not feel anything. And then some people will. And so everybody has their own individual ideas. So I always invite people for skepticism. I think it's very important to not only do it with the paranormal, but in your life, and also in religion. You just have to question all things at all times. You don't want to be a sheep.
Question all things at all times. If I'm being totally honest, I wasn't quite sure what to expect when meeting Lawyer in person, but I was delightfully surprised to discover that we shared a lot of similar sentiments when it came to the paranormal and spiritual beliefs. Over the course of this afternoon, we discussed everything from raising goats and chickens, Egyptian mummy eating parties, and everything in between. But Lawyer's compulsion to learn about what at first may seem dark and scary really resonated with me, as this has pretty much always been my way of thinking too. As a child, I may not have been brave enough to leave the safety of my own bed to investigate spooky noises in the night, but I've always been curious as to why certain things frighten us. Oftentimes by reading, talking to others with different beliefs or backgrounds, or just investigating for ourselves, we find that the big bad scary monster was really just a cuddly little teddy bear. But as always, there are some things that just can't be explained.
In growing up, I remember several things. And, again, you just start feeling like, am I misremembering? Am I adding embellishments? And I'm like, I don't want to add embellishments, but what do I remember? And like, I remember there was a time when I was a little boy, I was always, after watching the movie, I just couldn't sleep by myself. And not only I couldn't sleep alone in a room, I couldn't sleep alone in my bed. I had to sleep with my brother. And I remember one time I was sleeping with my brother, and then I felt him get up, and then and I just was sort of like in the in between stage, and then I was waiting for him to sort of come back in, and my eyes were closed, and then I felt him sit down at the feet of my bed. And I opened my eyes, and then I saw him, and I'm like, get to bed, you're scaring me. Because he turned around, and he was just looking at me. I'm like, stop it, you're scaring me, go to bed. And then I sort of saw his face look beside me, and so I traced what he was looking at, and my brother was sleeping next to me. And when I looked back, what I saw is my brother was gone. And I remember that instant so vividly, and I just don't, I could never debunk it. I don't know if I'm misremembering. I don't know anything. There was another instance that I remember, and when I talked to because this experience happened with my uncle and my cousin, that we were outside playing, and we saw a lady wearing black, and then she said, don't get dirty. Don't get wet, stop playing rough. And we're like, okay. And then we just started playing, and then we went inside, and my mother was cooking, and she was wearing a floral dress. And we're like, why did you change? And she's just like, what are you talking about? And we said, you were outside and you told us this, not to do this, not to do that. And she's just like, I don't know. And as adults, when I have asked my uncle and my cousin this experience, they retell it exactly like I did, without any embellishments. So I just don't know. That was one of the things that I couldn't debunk. But then there was this one instance when me and my sisters, I have 4 sisters, and we all have had the same dream from childhood, the exact same dream. And that was that we would go to this Catholic church that we would all go to, a real church. And it was called Cristo Rey. Christ is King, and there was a Christ, and this is real, not the dream. There's a Christ in purple garb on a pedestal, and he had human hair and glass eyes, and he's looking down, and he's full of the milagros that people give them. And in our dream, we go up to it, and all we see are the feet, and then we see the feet move to kind of step down. And I was telling them that is one of my scariest dreams, and then one of my sisters was like, I have the exact same dream, and the other was like, I have the exact same dream. So all of my 4 siblings and me, we all have had the dream of this, and that's all that happens. We go into the church, and then we go to give him our gift, and then we see him and try to step down. And it's weird because we never talked about it to each other. We just all had the same dream.
I know we discussed doppelgangers in our last episode, and I even floated the suggestion that maybe what was potentially haunting our friend Mike and Susan's house was disguising itself as a member of the family. But in our previous episodes, these encounters have been more fleeting. Lawyer's experiences seem a little more up close and personal. Who or what was that sitting at the foot of his bed? This story literally gave me chills. And who was this woman in black who warned the young boys not to get dirty, if it wasn't Lawyer's mother? Was it perhaps a deceased loved one who was merely lending a helping hand and watching over the boys? Or were these some kind of psychic projection from Lawyer's family members themselves? The fact that Lawyer and his sisters have had shared dreams in the past surely suggests a strong psychic link between the family members. Maybe I'm pushing the boat out a bit far, but I think these could be plausible paranormal theories. Now, I'd like to know what you think and what your opinion is. So send me a message on Instagram at Houston_strange, or pop over to the website and fill out the submission form letting me know your opinion. In the future, I'm going to hopefully do an episode where I go through all of these submissions and we can delve deeper into all of your personal opinions.
My sisters, they were always playing with the Ouija board. And to this day, they still speak to the same entity that they were speaking to in the 80s, to the same entity. And I remember one time they were playing the Ouija board. My nephew and niece were probably about 5 years old. Remember my two sisters, who were the mothers to each of the kids. They were playing the Ouija board. And the Ouija board was saying that they're sad because they wish that they could play with my nephew and nieces. And then one of my sisters was like, you can play with them. And she's like, but I can't. I have to get inside one of them in order to play with them. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, I have to have permission by one of you to be able to get inside one to be able to play. And I've talked to my sisters, and this is not misremembering. And my sister said, okay. And my other sister was like, no. But the sister that said, okay, the Ouija board stopped moving. And after I was just looking at the kids, and my nephew just sort of stopped and just sort of looked completely blank. And was just not moving, not doing anything, just sort of dumb and stiff, while my niece was trying to play with them. And then all of a sudden he just started acting normal, and then the Ouija board started moving again. She just said thank you, and that's giving me a chill remembering that. And that was one instance that I do recall that was a very, very frightening. We did have an instance in the house that we lived in when we lived in El Paso, Texas, and again it was the same entity that they would talk to, and she was always very demanding, which was very weird. And she was demanding, and she was very she would ask for a lot. And at one point, and this is going to sound ridiculous, she was just like, somebody's got a purse stolen, and there is a dumpster with a purse full of money. Go get it. While they're playing in the Ouija board. And then my sisters would go rummaging through this trash, and there's no purse. And then they'd come back, and then she'd be like, oh, somebody took it before you got there. So it was this manipulative being that she would constantly be doing that to my family throughout so much of our lives. And like I said, they still talk to this being. And at one point it was just like that she wanted toys, and she's like, go buy me toys and then put them in the room. And then we went, and then they would go and they'd buy toys, they'd put them up in the room, and then we'd come. She's like, go downstairs and I'll talk to you there. So they would be downstairs waiting, and then we heard the ball sort of drop and sort of bounce, and then we heard something jingle and go, and then we'd hear the Ouija board start moving and be like, that was fun, thank you. And so those were like instances that I remember talking to my family. And after that experience that happened in that apartment, it was a townhouse, she wanted to know if she could bring her friends in to play with her. And my family said yes. And so they're playing with the Ouija board. I'm getting a little shaky. I haven't told this story in a long time. And they said, yeah, you could bring your friends to play. And so that's when the ball and the thing started moving. And I remember that after that night, I remember going to school and just feeling kind of icky about the whole situation that we had just experienced. And then coming home and my family being outside the house and being like, we're waiting for my brother-in-laws and my older uncles to come because we have to move. And I remember not being allowed to go back inside the house, and my uncles and some of my aunts packing up our stuff and moving it away. And I remember that feeling that the house felt heavy and uncomfortable. And when I've spoken to my family about we had to move, they were just saying that we just couldn't live there anymore, that it changed, that it was suffocating, and that something was invited there that was no longer going to leave. Certain things, like I said, we were never able to debunk. And to this day, I get so annoyed that they still talk to this entity. And that's because I just remember how incredibly manipulative and how often it tells them to do stuff, and they do it. And so whenever people are playing with Ouija boards, I always explain to them the supernatural way that they work and also the scientific way that they work, and that they could decide one way or another, and what my experiences have been. And I feel that in my belief system, it is both. It is both the automotor movement, and it is also the supernatural that could cause this to work. And I always tell them, don't believe anything that they say, because what they try to do is they try to gain sympathy, and little by little make you do things so that they have an actual human being who's alive doing things that they can no longer do. And they can be like, they can be like, oh, I want to go to the movies, because I know that this entity that we speak to used to do that. Oh, I want to go to the movies. Well, yeah, come with us. And they're like, well, she would say, can you leave the seat right in between you two open so that I can sit there? And they're like, okay. And so she would make them do things, physical things, that would show that she has power of how they're going to act. And one of the things that I tell people is that, these spirits that they talk to on the Ouija board, they will pretend to be your dead grandmother or your sister who died or all these things. And that's often not who you're talking to, because one of your loved ones would know, okay, I lived, I died, I need to let my family go through their mourning process and pass on. But for a grandmother or a dead sister to constantly be attaching you to the board and to death, I don't believe that a family member would do that.
There's so much to unpack here. I feel like it was inevitable that we would end up with a Ouija board story, but I have never heard one quite like this. If you're unfamiliar with Ouija boards, they're typically a rectangular piece of wood or cardboard with the letters of the alphabet, numbers, and the words yes, no, hello, and goodbye carved or printed on them. The user or users push a heart-shaped pointer along the board called a planchette, which points to the letters or words in order to communicate a message supposedly from the spirit world. Ouija boards almost perfectly represent my personal opinion on the paranormal. I am generally a skeptic, and Ouija boards are just inanimate objects. A toy, really. But at the same time, I've always been too chicken to try them. They've been debunked time and time again, and the most typical explanation I have seen is usually some variation of the ideomotor effect. This was a theory that first appeared in William James's 1890 publication, The Principles of Psychology. In a nutshell, this theory suggests that the participant using the Ouija board will move the planchette unconsciously. This theory is also applied to practices like dowsing or pendulum work, stating that tiny unconscious movements by the individual user cause the dowsing rod or pendulum to react. The user then wrongly perceives this to be supernatural. Now, I definitely believe this theory to a certain degree because it sounds plausible and has been a go-to answer for many well-educated skeptics throughout the years. But It doesn't quite explain why societies all over the world have used various forms of dowsing or divination for thousands of years to successfully locate underground water supplies. English archaeologist and parapsychologist T.C. Lethbridge did extensive research on dowsing practices throughout his career, and using a simple wooden ball on a string, he claimed to establish exact measurements to find all manner of materials, from lead and silver to extremely rare truffles buried underground. In more recent years, when singer-songwriter Hosier bought a piece of land in his home county of Wicklow in Ireland, he was advised to hire a local water diviner to uncover a lost well on his property, and allegedly, upon arriving, this man used his divining rods to find the well almost instantly. Sometimes I find the skeptic answers to be a little bit too black and white, a little too dismissive. Maybe dowsing doesn't always work. Maybe you need the right person, or a person who is a little more in tune. Maybe multiple elements need to align for these things to work, like an open circuit needs a switch to operate a light. Maybe a Ouija board is just a toy, a flimsy piece of cardboard that you can buy at Target for $20 until the right person sits down to use it. Maybe that's when the circuit closes and the connection is made. With these thoughts in mind, does that mean that any item, really, could become haunted? We've all heard literal horror stories from people returning from some far-off land with a trinket or decoration and suddenly their house is haunted. Or surely you've seen the countless videos of allegedly haunted dolls online. But Lawyer has collected oddities and curiosities from all over the world, so I thought, who better to ask?
So having the oddities and curiosities shop, I would have people come in and they're like, this lamp is haunted, you want to buy it? And I'd be like, I'm like, no, and then I'd hear the story and it's like thinking in my head, no, your lamp is not haunted. No, this table isn't haunted. And then I started thinking and talking to him. It's like, when a lamp flickers, it is not the lamp that is haunted. It is interacting with the energies around it. So you bringing the lamp here is not that the lamp has these things. No, it was something in that room. Some of that energy was causing the lamp to flicker. The lamp is perfectly fine, so I'm not buying your lamp. But bring me, whatever's haunting that room. But I don't feel that things are haunted in the traditional sense that people feel that they are. Like this thing is haunted, like I was just explaining. I feel that it is just, it is able to respond or react to whatever energies around it. And I tried to sort of think about that further and think about, well, if items were to actually be haunted, what items could actually be haunted? And I started thinking, well, then let me think if I was a spirit. What item would I be like, I'm going to possess this and haunt this? And it wouldn't be a lamp. It wouldn't be a table. It would be a teddy bear, or it would be a doll. And the reason I feel that, and it may be not, and again, it could be my romantic mind talking, but I feel like a ghost, spirits just want to feel alive again and feel acknowledged. Those that don't just want to be left alone. And the best way to be acknowledged is to possess something that gets cared for and loved. And the only item that is an object that gets cared for and loved like a human without being human is going to be a teddy bear or a doll. And what better conveyor to do this than a child? And so I can see whenever people say, this doll is haunted or this bear is haunted, then I take notice and I'll be like, you know what? You might be right, and this is why I feel that could be. But as far as any other objects, I just, no. In the store that I own, there happened, like you can tell that things started happening when things were there. When things were introduced, rather, to the collection, I noticed things were happening. There's a doll here that when we introduced to the collection, things started happening around it. And we had surveillance cameras, and we started seeing things falling off in the middle of the night, or sort of lights sort of just going, or shadows passing it, that were not happening before that happened. Now, with those items, that doll right now is here, and we don't have those things happening here. And it is that with having a public space like a store and people coming in, there's a lot of energy of people coming in. And so they're bringing a lot of energy from outside, leaving it there and leaving, or kicking up energies that exist. When that doesn't happen here, when I said that things that come here, they sort of meld and sort of mesh together. Um, they sort of do because the house sort of overpowers that, and it doesn't have 100 people coming in and out, disturbing the energy, the harmony of the energies that it's created. Now, when I finally open as an actual bed and brunch, that may be different, but right now, the energies are really at ease. But there have been stories, like I was saying, there was one where, and again, we're skeptical when anything like that happens, but there have a video where we had this doll, and it's the doll that is right up there in the cameo.
Okay.
Of course, the doll didn't look like that. That one was in the fire. But when it came to us, it did not come in that beautiful cameo. I did that to show us. So I like showing respect for anything that somebody says, this is haunted. Do you want it, or do you want to buy it, or whatever? I immediately think, oh, poor baby. Let me ease the way that it feels, because to me, a haunting isn't just an energy inhabiting an object. It is an unsettled energy that is in a place or in an object that is unhappy. And so I feel like, let me caress it and show it that it's okay in whatever journeys it may have. And so I put it in this lovely little cameo, and I treated it well, and then I had it there. And then the first thing that happened was that there was this little doll marionette that was right. There was two marionettes. There was one marionette here, but there was like a marionette from Taiwan, a little wooden carving that was right next to it. And in the video, you see that coming off the wall, and then it hits the marionette next to it. But what is weird, and again, when you're a skeptic, you're like, okay, how did this happen? And a weird thing was that in the Wilde Collection, when we hung things, we did not hang them with the nails like that. You hang them like this, so it has to be lifted so that they don't just fall off and break. And so, you have to lift. And so that doll would have had to be lifted in order for it to come off. And that's already a lot. That's not just something shaking. And the foundation was concrete, so it wasn't like the building shaking because of trucks passing by or anything like that. And so the thing was that it would have to be, first of all, it would have to lift up a little bit, maybe like up by half an inch, before it comes down. And the second thing that was odd is that if, however that happened, when something comes down, it just comes down. But this not only had to be lifted, but it had to be thrown sideways, because the marionette was not right underneath it, but maybe like a foot or so off to the side. And so for it to hit that, and to hit it so violently, it had to be lifted and go sideways. And so that was something that happened. And in that room, there was another doll that I introduced into that room. And there is a video where in the doll, you see a shadow sort of creep over. And then right when the shadow creeps over the doll, then under the table that was in front of the doll, we had glass, and it looked like it got pushed, and all the glass went to one side. And I was afraid to post that video, because I hate when people post videos and I'm like, well, we're not seeing the whole thing. How convenient. Because, how do I know that somebody isn't pulling strings off to the side? And with that picture, with that video, I was like, oh my God, is somebody going to think that somebody from the other side pushed it? And but we had an angle where you can see both sides, and you can see that there isn't somebody on this side pushing it. And even when I posted it, somebody was like, well, somebody could be under the table. And I'm like, but the whole table is completely full of stuff. But then at that point, I'm like, you know what? Be a skeptic. I'm so glad that you're not just taking my word for it. Even though I know that I've kind of thought all this through, but I'm glad you don't believe it. Because I want people to, like I said, even question what I'm saying. But yeah, it sort of flung everything by. And it's always really interesting to catch those certain things, because whenever something happens on video, you have to look at the things happening around it for this one thing to happen. You don't just focus on the one thing, and you will see particles or shadows or like glimpses of something come into frame usually right before something happens, and that has been the experience with the things that have happened here with me.
How interesting. My opinion on haunted objects and hauntings in general changes almost daily at this point. But I think we're going to pick this up in the next episode, where we'll find out a little bit more about Lawyer's experiences since moving into RavenWolf Manor. This was a special video episode because, to be honest, I couldn't not take my cameras to RavenWolf Manor. And while I'm hoping to have more episodes like this in the future, don't worry if you're signing up to tell your story. Not all episodes are going to be video episodes. I just hope to have a few special cases like this along the way when the opportunity presents itself. Thanks again to everyone for joining me on this little adventure. Special shout out to my wife for actually coming along in person. Thank you to Lawyer for his time, honestly. And like I said before, Houston Strange is a passion project of mine. I try and do all of the work. I write the music, edit all the episodes, and perform the in-person interviews myself. But you tell the stories. So if you'd like to tell your own story, please visit houstonstrange.com and fill out the submission form. Or if there's a location within Houston and the surrounding area that you think would make an interesting episode, feel free to drop me a message on Instagram at Houston_strange. Please, if you have the time, also don't forget to rate and review the show or whatever streaming service you use, because that really helps the show. And until next time, stay strange, Houston.